Well, welcome to the This Is Fine edition of No Quarter November with Doug and Friends. We're here with Doug and Mr. Longshore. I'm Joe Rigney, and we are joined today with our good friend Michael Foster, all the way from the great state of Ohio. And as you can see, things in Ohio are just fine.
Yeah. He's the one in the midst of the this is the fine situation.
Yes, exactly right. So before we jump into our topic for today, I wanted to highlight a few things. You can head over to noquarternovember.com and get all the free books. There's still a bunch of them. Things like Calvinist Poetry, Beowulf, God Rest Ye Merry, Getting Ready for Christmas, Refuting the New Atheist, all kinds of good books. And then this Thursday, Canon is releasing a new Doug on the Road, behind the scenes of No Quarter November. So if you want to see how that sausage gets made, what happened to that big horse over there, you can wait for Thursday and watch it on canonplus.com. So with that, Michael, we're going to save the PCA. Are we going to save the PCA?
We're going to try, yeah.
Okay.
Try to save the PCA, the SBC, any great American Christian institution is something we should care deeply about.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in the PCA and what your involvement is.
Yeah, sure. So this goes back to Charlie Kirk actually being assassinated. For me, is that I was on the back porch at an Airbnb out in the Pacific Northwest and found out about Charlie Kirk. Some friends texted me that was at the event, and it hit all of us really hard. And I've been thinking about our church. Our church is independent Reformed church right now, thinking about joining the PCA. But it was one of those moments where I was like, man, I'm not going to go play footsie with a bunch of progressives in a denomination. And if I'm going to try to land our plane on that runway, I thought, let's clear it. So I'm very aware of what's going on in the PCA with female officers, like functional female officers. These are women who, not all of them are like wild feminists. Some of them are being put up to this by their pastors, but they're functioning as deacons or as more importantly, or just as importantly, but more consequential as elders. And so I thought I'll just start sharing all the things I already knew were going on. And I hashtagged it Save the PCA, and it caught on, and some other people hopped on to the sort of bandwagon and saw that I was working from a document I made way back in 2018 where I was just working my way through every church and every presbytery in the PCA and looking at what sort of female officer-like positions they had at these churches, And so I was working off that older document, and some of these folks that got involved created a much better document. And I said, sure, let's work on this together. And over time, it led to this big report that we did. We went through all English-speaking websites that were listed on the PCA's presbyteries. And we found a significant number of them had positions listed on their own website that looked very much like an officer. We found out that women were being put up into candidate phases, receiving identical officer training as elders would receive, being installed and commissioned, right? Commission's a big deal, bigger deal than ordination, right? It's totally different. It's because it starts with a C, not an O. But we saw, that this was, 8 to 10% of the churches in the PCA, based on just what was available on their website, And so it kind of became a big deal. And I think a lot of elders and pastors that fear God love their people and are very busy taking care of their own churches. And that goes for the PCA as well. And they don't know that these things are that widespread. And so I think it was a real wake-up call for a lot of folks. And we've seen a lot of good come from it already. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started. It wasn't, someone said it was like backed by American reformer money. I haven't got my check yet. But
did the Mossad one clear?
Yeah. Well, Google Suites is free. You can go use Google Sheets real easy. And but that's how this all kind of got started. And my vested interest kind of multi-layered. One is I was trained and ordained in the PCA and served there as a teaching elder for a time, and still have lots of close friends in the PCA. And actually, one of the ways I think that even the Series C worked out for a time for us was that Greg Strawbridge and Bill Smith and Rich Lusk were all men who were in the PCA that understood what my concerns would be, and I was able to connect with Greg, I think, along some of those PCA inclinations. So I care about the PCA for that reason. It's also the largest conservative reformed denomination in America at this time, like explicitly reformed in a confessional sense. Really, much of the reformed movement in America is downstream from the PCA. It's kind of a feeder for these micro-denoms, independent reformed churches and whatever. So I care about it because I care about the reformed movement in America. So that's one reason I got involved in it. And of course, I don't want to be an independent forever. So this was one of the more likely areas we might be able to land.
Is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it about 6,000 churches? You mentioned it's the largest. I've heard of around 6,000. Is that about right?
No, it's less than that. It's about 400,000 people, 1,600 churches, maybe, something along those lines.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really? 1,600, okay.
Yeah. So there's no way to tackle this particular problem without coming up against Tim Keller.
That's right.
Right? Because Tim Keller's church, Redeemer, they were technically inside the lines because they didn't have women deacons, because they didn't have men deacons either.
That's right.
Right. And so it's like here's our tricksy workaround. Tim Keller is a revered figure in the PCA. I'm assuming a number of the churches that you've identified as having this problem are following in Keller's footsteps. Has anybody brought the accusation that this is a vendetta against Keller and that sort of thing? Is your focus just women in office, or is this connected to other issues as well?
Well, they've brought all sorts of accusations that it's about all sorts of different things. Well, it's definitely connected to Keller, because Keller was the one that was actually violating the BCO in not calling people deacons without ordination, which is something that deacons must be ordained. It's something that's required by the Book of Church Order and, of course, by Scripture. But that was a technical way around to basically show that men and women are equal, right, in this office. That it's not. The problem is that they'll cite deaconesses throughout church history, but deaconesses are just more like female assistants to the deacons, and certainly that's the only way that word could be used in the PCA and not be violating the Book of Church Order. So one way you can prove that, just ask someone, what is the male version of deaconess, right? Is it a deacon or is it a deacon assistant? And if it's a deacon assistant, why not just call female deacon assistants, right? But it's because they're trying to create both have female officers, and it's word game. So Keller did that. He came within line eventually. But now here we are, where at some of these churches you have shepherdess that sit on a board that is either in tandem with the elders, or even will sit on the elders board with all those members or a representative from those members, sometimes in every single meeting, sometimes once a quarter or something like that in their session meetings. And you see how quick the slide happened, right, where they're using these sort of word games. There was one church that had a pastor of women, right, and it was a woman, right, and we called her out, and then the next day they edited it to shepherdess, and they thought that was a good move, but it wasn't a good move because it shows exactly that they're using these words of synonyms, because of course they are synonyms, right? So like a female pastor is a shepherdess, it's like the same thing. And so they're trying to use all these technicalities, word games to stay within the bounds of the BCO, not in a good faith sense, but like a Marxist, the way a Marxist will play around with words and all those sorts of things. And so that's what you're seeing in the PCA. So you have to call them out on their function, and you have to pin them down and demonstrate this. And I don't know if we've done a service or disservice long term, because now that they've cleaned up their websites a lot better. That's why we went through and used an archive site to take pictures of it to demonstrate, like, hey, here's what we saw. We didn't make this up. So you do see a lot of the games that Tim Keller was playing. But one reason they want to bring Tim Keller up is because people are so fond of him in the PCA. To attack Tim Keller, in their minds, attack the PCA, and they try to do it to discredit your concerns. So we didn't want to pin it too much to Keller's influence in the PCA, but there's undeniably a connection there. And
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask some data points again. You said 1,600 churches in the PCA, right?
Yep.
And then you said what percentage, according to the research, is doing funny business with some kind of ladies in leadership?
Of the ones that had visibility on the website, we had it right around 8 or 9%.
8 or 9%. So I'm bad at math. What is that?
160.
160 churches ish.
Yep.
And you said they're not, but there's always fancy footwork. So it could be deaconesses, it could be shepherdesses. But
women's leadership teams, women's council, women, it's just
or
like
even
all
women's
different.
care team.
Women's care team,
So generally, we hear women's care team, you're thinking maybe a meal train or some sort of work of mercy like that. But in some of these churches, we went and looked at it closer, and it was very clear that the women's care team was really just a female diaconate, right? It was really just a female deacon's board, and that's because there's this book, Alongside Care, that's really popular right now in the PCA, edited by a woman named Christina Fox. And Alongside Care is at one level, you can relate to it as a pastor, because they'll make this point that there's certain women's issues that is easier for a woman to address than a male pastor or even a pair of male elders helping women work through crisis. It's good to have these women that can come alongside the elders and provide some care to these women. That happens in every healthy church in one way or another. You have these godly older women that you say, hey, will you meet with this young lady? She's going through this thing, right? But that they first off, they do two things that are very important in that book. One, when is a woman in crisis? Well, according to that book, whenever she feels like she's in one. So,
problem
two,
one.
there's a huge jump towards the end of the book where it's not enough to have this be a sort of organic thing, but it needs to be formal and visible. And they actually, in the appendix of that book, suggest here's the vows they should take in front of the church, these alongside care workers. And it's a very good strategy too, because if you're against that, then you're against women in crisis, right? What sort of beast are you don't you care what women have to say? Don't you think women also should be helping other women in your church? Why would you ever be against alongside care? And we saw this language over and over again of alongside care, and it's coming into the PCA through that. And people are sympathetic to that when they're in really large churches. So they adopt these kind of female officers through pragmatic concerns, where it's just they have so many people and they're trying to divide it up to manage them, not through their pastorate. But like I always used to hear people say, small groups is our first level of pastoral care. And that's weird. I kind of thought it would be the pastors. But so now they create these shepherdesses to take care of the women in the church. And then the pastors deal with the other stuff. But so it's coming through the pragmatism, but it's also coming through egalitarianism that believe that women need a representative board of women, right? So the mothers of the church, and men then have the representative board of the elders, the fathers in the church. And you see this sort of parallel boards being pushed forward as something that is good and helpful for the church, which is, of course, is a denial of biblical ecclesiology.
Have you seen, let's say there's a church that doesn't have any officers or quasi-officers who are women, but if you go to worship Sunday morning, everything up front, except for the sermon, is done by a woman. So the scripture reading, serving not administering communion, but distributing communion, the worship band, so you could have a 90% female representation up front during a worship service and technically be okay. That goes back to Keller's comment. A woman can do anything an unordained man can do. Yeah. But nobody then says, man, we have unordained men doing too much. They don't fix it in that direction. Mm-hmm. They fix
Correct.
it, right? Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what's happening, and that's what we mean. So we have video. So it's kind of funny how this came about. The churches that wouldn't meet for public worship, they had all these streaming services, and they started streaming all their services. So suddenly we had this huge amount of services we could go look at and to see what they were doing.
It's like public school
It's like public school teacher. Yeah, like during COVID.
What are they saying? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of how this went down. So we have found everything, but I have not heard one read the words of institutions, word of institution yet, but pastoral prayer, prayer of invocation, exhortations during tithing, distributing the elements, as you pointed out, benediction, all that sort of stuff that are part of the worship service. Of course, lots of female worship leaders. That's been well known for a long time in the PCA. But you do have these, like the idea that anyone thinks that there's not female representation in the PCA is crazy. Well, they don't know what they're talking about. There's plenty of female representation in terms of like actual females involved in the worship service. But they're involved in things like that even the Westminster, like the public reading of Scripture, is normatively reserved for the officers, the teaching elders, or for those that are being trained to be in the office, right? And so do they not have any men that they want to train how to read Scripture publicly? They're not trying to prep. Every church that's healthy needs to have a huge pipeline of future leaders. And one of the ways you do that is you allow them to participate in certain parts of the worship as you prep them that way. So they're clearly making a decision to position women as leaders through visibility. Whoever stands on that stage on Sunday morning has influence. Bottom line, a pastor knows that from announcements to anything. And so you need to think through that. So they are putting these women up on the stage, having them go through a process that's very like ordination prep, receiving questions, exams, votes, installation, commissioning, doing everything but the sermon proper in the words of institution. But somehow they're not officers, right?
And somehow nobody has proposed it's okay for the women to do all that so long as they have a head covering.
Yeah.
Michael, what percentage of the PCA ministers say are with you, really seeing this as a big problem? And then maybe what percentage are just like, oh, he's a troubler of Israel? Like, do you have categories for where the other ministers are at?
Well, I think there's people that why not both, right? that I'm actually right and a troubler. But I think a good bit outside of the metro areas are actually very concerned about this. I think some of these folks are catching on that the younger generation has no patience for this at this moment. Things have shifted underneath their feet in a way that I think has surprised them. But this is what kind of drove the foundation of the founding of the PCA, which was the PC U.S. Having women officers. It really was one of the big deals. And that came up through the ruling elders almost more than anything, the concerned Presbyterians. And it's because ruling elders have jobs, and when you have a job, it makes you more conservative a lot of times. Because you got people you have to answer to and metrics you have to hit, and your emotions and thoughts and vibes, they only go so far. So ruling elders, I think, are pushing back just like they pushed back on Greg Johnson. Right. So back in 2021, they had a huge number of ruling elders show up at General Assembly. And they're like, what's all this gay stuff that's going on? No. All right. No more gay stuff. And they may have not been sophisticated or whatever. But I do think a lot of ruling elders are up in arms. I think I had a lot of guys. I had several guys say, hey, the way you're approaching this is bad. and then like 3 days later, after they had reviewed everything, said, "Hey, we're really sorry. You're actually right. This is a real big issue." So I think there's a bunch of people that are concerned and want to take steps. I don't know what percentage it would be, but it's very significant. It's enough to make the change if they're willing to get a little dirty, right? Draw some blood, make a little bit of a mess. And that's the big question. Do they, I already had some people push back. I think some of you are listening right now, like, "Hi, Presby class. Hi, Brad. How you doing?" And I think some of them will probably watch this, and they'll say things, "Well, you guys are going outside the courts." Well, first off, I haven't filed charges against anybody. I've been calling attention to publicly available data. The reason you put stuff on a website is for people to look at from public. So I had one guy said, "Well, you send us more traffic, than we ever expected." Well, you want to send me a check or give me a ham for Christmas? I mean, what? But we were simply bringing attention to all this, so people would know, and and folks have written letters, complaints. There's overtures coming up. Steps have been taken, and but people will say, "We have to move slow." No, you don't. You have to move deliberately. There's a process. If the process takes a real long time, it takes a real long time. If it moves swiftly, it moves swiftly. The main thing is to be deliberate in following your process and taking action. A lot of times people want it to be slow because they know folks have the attention span of a hamster, and that if they can kind of slow walk this and tie it up in the courts, it won't go anywhere. And then they can just kind of live in this sort of gridlock where they've made a way of life. Go ahead, sorry.
No, so is it just as a matter of historical interest, in the mainline Presbyterian Church, the first church to elect a female presbyter was here in Moscow, Idaho. So
wow,
that was our contribution.
Moscow's trouble.
Moscow's
I don't know that says that.
Well,
you're just adding fuel to that fire, Doug.
Yeah,
Thanks.
well, I'm just saying that we're willing to confess our sins.
Okay.
So my question has to do, Michael, with remedy. So if it gets into the courts, it could get tied up for years. If there's a study commission or study committee appointed, it could be years, right? And I'm wondering if it could be solved with simple vote at General Assembly or a vote on a particular overture. Is there something that would signal the egalitarians that it's time to move on, and then a bunch of them would? And is that possible this next summer?
There'll be a lot of overtures. There's a ton of overtures coming to next year's General Assembly. And one that was kind of interesting, and this had to do with a amendment to the rules of Assembly operation, the RAO, and they were trying to get folks to report on how many deacons they had, or the nature of their deacons at their church, and that got shut down. Actually, they said that's too big of a burden, right? But some of the same people that were arguing against that were arguing for reporting the kind of racial ethnic makeup of your church, right? So it's like too hard for 5 deacons, but we can figure out like how many Pacific Islanders we have in our, but anyhow, I think any overture that brings greater visibility and accountability on who you consider an officer would really help. But this is going to be solved at a presbytery level with men who are willing to speak against it, get involved in credentials and examinations, also reviewing the minutes that the different churches have to submit to presbytery and holding them accountable. What people want is they want a top-down rule that will do all the work for them, but you have to enforce it. It's kind of like the guys that talk about going full subscriptionism, right? Well, look, man, if you're not holding people accountable with partial, right, good faith, making it the rules stricter aren't going to help you if you're not enforcing the ones you have. The real issue, I think, is guys have to be bold to get involved at the presbyterial level and hold these people accountable, and push people out, and say, no, you can't do this, and hold. I think there's a couple churches. Well, I pretty much know a few churches are going to end up outside of the PCA already because of this.
Because are they leaving voluntarily, or are they going to be squeezed out, or are they going to be expelled?
I think squeezed is probably more the way things get done in the PCA than expelled. They'd have to be pretty feisty, and
they have to want to be a martyr.
Yeah,
right.
And I actually think that's so costly to a congregation. If it's a decent sized church, that a pastor would never do that. Like he would do it. He'd be very sanctimonious and love you, fathers and brothers, I love you, but we have found that we fit better.
Fathers and brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's just mothers and sisters. We're going to the EPC or the ECO or something like that. I think that's probably how it will happen. It's kind of how it went down with Greg Johnson to some degree, and I suspect that will be the case here. But I do think we're 10 years away from a whole nother generation taking over. Part of the problem you have in the PCA is Keller died, and it is not cool to go into the PCA anymore. When Keller was at kind of the height of his influence and fame, the sort of in the city, for the city stuff, like there's a lot of young men that really looked up to him, and they went to CTS, and they came through RUF, and they wanted to do this sort of hipster church plant thing. That's not what's going on anymore. People don't know who Tim Keller is increasingly. No, very few people know who Harry Reeder is. And so I think the pipeline of pastors is drying up on both sides, but especially on the liberals. And I think the younger men in America are trending more conservative. And these guys need to understand that we want the younger men to come into our institutions and preserve it. If you continue to play footsie with this liberalism, this younger generation will have nothing to do with y'all, and they're going to end up in the hands of some of the elements we see out there in the church that will take them down some dark roads that we really don't want to see happen. And I do think some of the leaders in the PCA see that, and they'll try to make adjustments. Can they pull it off? I don't know. It's a big beast, and it's very legal in the way they deal with things.
So it seems like there's like layers to your, like when you think about remedies, because you have a kind of there's an anthropology underneath it all. There's this really different like anthropology at work. Like a lot of the shell game stuff, the looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, but it is not a duck. I just need to know it is not a duck. All of that sort of stuff is trying to avoid just like nature and reality. So even the Kellerite principle of a woman can do anything an unordained man can do is basically you have this egalitarian anthropology that is running into a couple of inconvenient Bible verses, and so just tries to find all the workarounds. And so it seems like that problem you can't solve that problem procedurally or with the BCO, right? Like it's because it's just, it's a whack-a-mole game of if we say no more women's advisory councils, whap, they go, well, guess what? We don't have a women's advisory council. We have a women's advising council, which is totally different. That's right. Very, very different. We no more shepherdesses, and then they'll just they'll just pick a Spanish word or something like that, and like whatever the Spanish word for pastor is, we'll do that. And we get to kick, 2 boxes. We get to like be multicultural and do the liberal thing you're trying to do. So when you look at that lay of the land, it seems like the procedural battle or we got to enforce the BCO is about trying to get the liberalizing elements to self-select out or squeezed out, right? Like you're trying to just say we just need that gone. They can, if they want to go that way, they can go that way. Is that kind of at some level when you think about the battle plan or how do we move this ball forward? It's like, hey, we're going to have to hit that. We're going to have to get at the anthropology issue at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, that you have to deal with that through relay examinations and credentials, those sort of committees. They're just going to have to come to terms with that. We live in the internet age. We have the world's ran by group chats these days. The days of a lack of transparency is over, and holding these people accountable publicly. I mean, it's been crazy to watch how some of these folks have reacted to me sharing like videos of their live stream that they like. It's first off, it's a public worship service, right? That's what it is. It's public. Second off, you streamed it to the entire world, and some of them are mad. Like one was like, "Will you take that down?" No, I will not. I will not take that down. It's not happening, you know. And so I think part of this is being willing to have some of these battles in public and just hold them accountable. And I've seen these guys are like, take, man, I'll just name names. Take Cassidy down at Spanish River. That guy's a big bully. And he's bullying some of these young teaching elders online. And someone quotes Thornwell, and now he's a racist, right? And so he's like bullying these young guys. And then, but he doesn't know what to do when someone like me comes around and like, hey, let me show you what his David Cassidy's bylaws say. They've created a category of gospel workers where they get IRS benefits. So clearly they're ministers of some sort. That's both men and women. They can do all these long lists of things, right? And just by creating visibility on that, transparency on that, and he couldn't say, hey, I'm not going to use lawfare against me, was enough to really put some pressure on him. He had to write a letter to his church. I'm referred to in that letter as the Ohio entity, which is a new one, man.
That's how we've always thought of you.
I was like,
the man right? from Batavia.
Yeah, but I think this battle, the pulpit is so much more powerful than the courts in most situations, right? But the pulpit requires courage, and I'm not given to preaching about the trends of the day or anything like that very often. I'll bring them up as it makes sense, but even if you're the most sort of spirituality of the church guy, like this is very this affects your people. You should be talking about this is happening in your denomination. You have women who are being used to do the work that pastors are supposed to do. It's not good for them. It's not good for the church, and it's a rebellion against God's word. And so these guys should be talking about it. And then when other people are like going against the standards, both the Westminster and then the BCO, just call them out online. And people will say, well, why didn't you contact me privately? Well, because you made it a public issue. Mm-hmm. That's why. Yeah. You made it a public issue. You thought, you took the time to create this sermon, to write it out, to stand up there, let someone record it, and then post it online. I think this has passed several layers of edits that should have said stop, but you didn't, and now we're going to talk about it. And just say you're wrong and don't do it again, and then we'll drop it. I'm not looking to get a pound of flesh out of someone, but what I think really, if just a small percentage of these guys started going after folks publicly, you be polite, don't be nasty, be straight up, that would shock the whole system. They wouldn't know what to do.
It would just be a matter of, what are you doing? Look what you're doing. Gary North, in his book Crossed Fingers, when he was talking about the liberalization of the mainline Presbyterian Church, he said somewhere north of 80%, 80 to 85% of the ministers in the Presbyterian Church, when it was captured by the liberals, were evangelical conservative men.
Yeah, I believe that.
Right. So it was overwhelmingly, if you just looked at the demographics, it was overwhelmingly a conservative and faithful collection of churches. But liberals are like they're like a cancer that knows how to go for the lymph nodes, and they capture the lymph nodes, and then they spread out from there. If the Presbyterian Church, the main line, was in that configuration when they lost to the liberals, where would you place the PCA? Is it liberal? Is it in danger of falling to the liberals? Is this the battle? If you lose the battle, it's all over. How would you rate the PCA's health? Are they in the ICU? Are they mildly sick? Is this the last stand? What is it?
They're definitely the leadership of the PCA is very much up for grabs, and so when I went to GA 2 years ago, I was kind of shocked by how the progressives were leaderless and almost confused and not sure what to do, and they were losing a lot at the mic. They were losing a lot on their overtures 2 years ago. They seem to this past year to got a little bit of their swagger back. But I still think they don't really have anyone as sophisticated as Keller. Keller is very sophisticated, and the conservatives have some better leadership. But I also think they really are downplaying some of the risks, those that are towards the top, that this issue presents and how quick it could spread. So I think it really hangs in the balance. There's huge portions that are very healthy, but that 80-20, that's easy to believe is the case in the PCA right now. Like that's certainly, it's probably actually more. I mean, I tend to think about the PCA as the right as the conservatives, the left as the progressives that are really trying to change the meaning of the words and the standards and all that, and then the moderates that are the squishy middle. So the moderates are going to go with whatever's the nicest thing, right? If someone screams and makes too much of a mess, the moderates will probably back down. And they're the sort of parent that says, look, if you'll just obey when we're in the grocery store, I'll get you a candy bar, right? That's who these moderates are. Like they're willing to placate. I think there's, I don't know, 1/3 of the PCA is like truly committed to their confessional tradition and all that, and then about another third would be the moderates, and another third would be the more progressive leaning people. So that's where we're up.
So I have a follow-up to that. That's basically comparing it to what I experienced in the SBC. So I was in the SBC. All of this is kind of just bringing back all sorts of memories. It's so interesting to compare them because the SBC has 50,000 churches, or so they claim. So 50,000 to 1,600. And when Moeller took over Southern, Molly Marshall was the head of the systematic theology department, and he cleaned house. I don't know, he turned over like 98% of the faculty, just went to work. But he was backed by the board at that time, but that's the 90s, I think 90s. And of course, fast forward to what, I don't know, 3 SBCs ago, and you still had Rick Warren and women pastors. So you had it all continuing that whole time. And you have a lot of people doing the same kind of work you're doing. But what stuck out to me in the SBC is that the conservatives in the SBC are very vocal. So they're doing the things that you're doing now because it's just democracy gone wild. So there is no presbytery to go to. It's just everything's like this church did that, and I'm opposed to it, and I'm going to get out the vote at the next convention. I mean, there's stories of people actually like paying people to bust people to get votes in. It's just like America, democracy gone wild. And my I guess a concern I have for the PCA would be, it strikes me that in that Presbyterian system, you have Presbyterian government. It's basically your conservatives are not quite as rowdy. They're not quite as country as you need to be to clean house. So they're like, we believe in the confession, and by believing in the confession, I also kind of believe in order and decency and decorum. To a degree that actually makes me incapable. I don't even understand. Those men don't seem to me to speak like the prophets. When I can find the conservatives in the SBC, I always like them because it's going to be festive and they're ready. Like it's like there's prophets teed up, just ready to gun for Russell Moore in a 2-minute ERLC update. Like everyone has tailored their questions to just blast them off the platform and watch him to try to dodge the questions. Is there that kind of zeal in the 1/3 of the conservatives, or are they kind of stuck in the confession such that they can't drive this thing out?
There are some. I mean, it's still a lot of the conservatives are Southern in their demeanor. right? They're Southern gentlemen. Decorum does matter to them. Here's what I wrote. I wrote this this is a paper I turned in as a book review on Sean Michael Lucas's For the Continuing Church. This is what I wrote years ago. Liberals love bureaucracy. Conservatives, on the other hand, rarely seem to accept. We've seen in the events leading up to the formation of the PCA. The conservatives attempted to preserve confessional fidelity through the courts of the church, but at each attempt, their efforts were thwarted. The liberals succeeded, and I'm quoting Sean Michael Lucas now, at capturing the machinery of the denomination through very unpresbyterian shadow organizations. Lucas explains that the liberals were, and I quote, well organized, highly articulate, and zealous in the attainments of their goals. The conservatives weren't. Worse yet, this is me now. Worse yet, they had a historical tendency to underestimate their liberal counterparts. I mean, it's the same thing all over again.
Yep.
Where they're using, they got caught on this national partnership, group, this sort of shadow group. And I don't think there's anything wrong with organizing how you should vote and think through things at a GA level, but they're kind of being very secretive about it and hiding all of this. And so I think a lot of the guys, they want to play by the rules, which I respect, and they want to be nice, but these guys aren't playing by the rules, and they're not they're not operating in good faith. And you're not allowed to say that in the PCA, right? You're not allowed to say that, well, this guy, he's a brother in good standing. Yeah, until he's not, right? That's what we're trying to solve.
Well, this goes back to a couple of you who have used the word decorum already. I don't have any doubt where Kevin DeYoung would be positionally on this issue, right? He would be against women pastors, women elders. He'd be conservative and solid on the issue. But if someone came to GA breathing fire at the microphone, that word decorum might come up. Do you know where Kevin DeYoung would be positionally or tactically in this fight?
My take, so here's always been my take on DeYoung. He and I met at an airport once. I think on paper, Kevin's very conservative, very much committed to the standards. Pretty fantastic teacher on that stuff. I've benefited from some of his books. But I think Kevin, days of mixing it up like that seem to be a little behind him. I haven't seen him really do, like the last big risk I saw him take, which I was thankful for, is when he went after, he was promoting being married and having a large family as normal. I remember a couple of years ago on Twitter, and they went after him. He stood his ground and all that. But I don't know. I think he's going to be much more the sort of Southern gentleman, even though he's not a Southerner at all. I don't think he's that sort of scrappy guy. He's more of a work through the courts, very.
It's academic. He's
very academic in that way. Yeah, I don't want to treat guys. What you don't want to do when you're trying to recapture something like this is you don't want to make enemies where you can have friends. You want to be friends with as many people as you can. And the way I think about some of these guys is in the movie Braveheart, which is not historically accurate at all. But in Braveheart, Robert the Bruce is this sort of guy that's stuck. He has to operate in a way that keeps the kingdom working, and his dad and all the nobles and whatever, and then Mel Gibson doesn't follow that path, right? But eventually Robert the Bruce sees, like, no, I have to break free. This really matters. I have to take the right stand. I do think there is a class of people like that are a little late to the fight, but man, I don't care. I don't care if you're late to the fight if you show up.
Right.
If you're out there and you've been battling and when you're out there in the trenches and you're kind of on the forefront of something, yeah. Have I said things I probably shouldn't have said? Have I? Yeah, of course I have. I'm sorry. Tell me where I've sinned and I'll repent. At the same time, like, it's kind of brutal out here, guys. And so if someone comes and says, well, hey, we'll take it from here. Let's let's go, let's fight. You get reinforcements, praise the Lord for them. So I'm really hoping to see some of these men who are a little safe, a little clean, the guys that wear their sparring pads to a street fight. I'm hoping that they'll take those pads off and mix it up and see that this really is the need of the day. We'll find out if that happens, though.
My 2 cents on that is, at least the way it worked in the SBC, and I anticipate it's going to be the same in the PCA, is you actually have to get men in the PCA that are going to operate the way that the Cowboys do in the SBC. And you have to be okay with the fact that the guys at the top are not going to operate that way. And so I was a part of a group that we would get messages from the statesmen that would say, please don't do it now. Please not now. Okay. But then 2 months later, we get, can you do it now? Right? Like, we knew our position on the battlefield and had good relationships with guys that didn't, and no pressure to them to fight like we do, because you have your own place on the battlefield. But if you don't have those men that actually have courage, this is my concern when I look at the PCA, I just don't know if you're in the PCA. I've got a question mark. Can you speak like the prophets when need be, or is that decorum actually on the top suffocating anybody that wants to enter into that communion?
Can Presbyterians brawl?
Can Presbyterians brawl? I mean,
that's the question.
John Knox says yes.
They definitely can in the past, right? In the history.
Well, Southerners have historically not been great at winning wars, but I have hope for them.
Well, they won every one except for their own.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. That's true. That's a good point. But I think so. The analogy I've been using is I give people the story of Grandpa's farm, right? The idea that Grandpa bought 1,000 acres when 1,000 acres was affordable, and then he built this ranch. And he gave it to his children who didn't really appreciate it, and sold portions of it off, and brought on farm hands and investors that didn't have the right sort of concerns. And now they're getting older, and the kids are growing up, and they actually see the value, how hard it is to get 1,000 acres and to build a ranch and do all that. And they want to fight to reclaim what their grandpa tried to give them. It's their inheritance, right? That's what an institution is. It's this durable structure that serves a purpose that cuts across generations. And we can't keep giving up institutions just because one generation didn't love and respect it. We have to take it back if we can. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you're grandpa, right? Sometimes you're the one that's building that ranch, and so be it. But the reason people keep going after institutions is because they're powerful. They're like generational storehouses of gravitas, right? All these godly men came together to build something, and that's where you can have something that's far past its best days and still be so influential and so powerful. And that's why progressives and effeminate, weak men are very attracted to institutions and grab onto it, because they can't do it themselves. So they want to take over someone that has done it. But it's our inheritance. It belongs to us. If you're Reformed, you're confessional, you're a Presbyterian, if you're in that American tradition, like the PCA is part of your inheritance. You should want to see it do well.
How much, when you think about the institutions, a big part of the kind of the turnaround in the SBC did involve, like, not just the SBC as a whole, but like the various entities, like Moeller getting, it took years, but eventually you get a guy into the Southern Seminary that can kind of change some direction. When you look at the educational institutions, whether the colleges or the seminaries affiliated with the PCA, where do you, like, what's your eval there? Because like the ones that I know, or the thing that basically anytime Covenant College comes across my feed or anything, it's just a train wreck of like, this is going to be bad. And so if this is like the PCA college, it doesn't give me a lot of hope in that regard. It feels like it's like you're going to need something from outside. At the same time, I look at what something like Greenville Presbyterian and having gotten to know some of the guys there a little bit, I'm really encouraged by the kind of caliber that they're kind of aiming at, and the courage and confessionalism that they're seeking to promote. So like I see, like, but I'm outside and I just see it kind of at a distance. Like when you look at those educational, college and seminary, like hopeful, mixed bag, train wreck.
Well, so I think Westminster East is definitely going a good direction, and there's a lot of great people on staff there, certainly ones working their way up. Greenville is extremely solid and growing. I was actually just down there for a pig roast a couple of weeks ago.
That's solid.
And, yeah, it was great. It was good. It's growing. There's more and more people going there. And what I love about Greenville is they kind of bring in people you would that come from all these different. It's not your standard seminary. You'll have a lot of people from Brazil, but also a lot of people that are like feel called to the ministry later in life, 30s, 40s. And they're willing to work with those guys. I think Westminster, I'm actually going on their podcast tomorrow, I believe, to talk about this issue. Covenant is certainly problematic. Both Covenant College and the seminary, there have been some positive movements at the seminary. But I think Greenville and Westminster, there's LAMP. There's a lot of different ways to get into the PCA, and I think the Covenant pipeline is going to start really drying up, and the RTS is going to dry up to some degree, and that's why they're having to push all these master's programs for women. They're having a hard time getting a hold of men. Whoever can get the younger men, and I know that's kind of become a meme online, but let's just say under 40, those that have the energy and vitality to really take over or start a church or whatever, like typically speaking, wherever those men are attracted are going to be the future. And I think a lot of the men that are going to want to be part of a confessional denomination aren't going to want to go to a school like CTS, right? So CTS is going to have to change or die, and they're going to want to go to Greenville, or they're going to find an alternate path through, Mid-American or LAMP or some other way. So I think I'm encouraged by the possibility, but if you look at Mission to North America, a lot of financial issues there. Aaron Winans really left them $2 million, was $2 million over what his budget should have been, but they've removed him, and now they've got some guys in there that are better, and they're trying to hold them accountable. Would I send any of my people through M&A if I was in the PCA? No, I would not. Would I send my sons to Covenant College? Absolutely not. Would I send my best candidate to CTS? Nope, wouldn't do that either. And so that's a real problem. But there are other avenues to come in and reclaim this. I'll just say, look, progressives are sissies. You just got to fight back. No one fights back. Like, well, when I fight back, they scream. Yeah, that's part of winning. That's what winning sounds like. It sounds like them shrieking and saying, "Stop talking about it." And yeah, I got in trouble some years ago for a tweet. And it went super viral, and someone was giving me trouble about it again. So I just took my phone up. All right, are you talking about this tweet? And this retweeted it. I'm like, look, you just have to let them know this is not going away. I'm not backing down. And then conduct yourself to the best of your ability in an above reproach way, dignified. And you can beat these guys. They're easy to beat. They just are used to people rolling over for
as we kind of wrap up here, any recommendations? We've had some people ask, I just joined a PCA church, anything I can read on this? Are there either on the substantive issues or on the kind of more, I think you guys have a website, savethepca.com, is that right? So people, if they want to know kind of the lay of the land and the statistics and all that kind of stuff, savethepca.com, go there. Are there any books or pamphlets or articles that you would point people to kind of orient themselves to these kind of issues?
Oh, man. Well, if you want to see how bad things are, go read the 2017 Women in Ministry report. That's a study committee that came out, and that is a terrible report. And so if you want to see where people want to take things, Kathy Keller was on that report, by the way. And you can go, Erwin Ince was also on that committee that put that report together. So that's more like, oh, this is depressing. But you'll see where people want to take things. So I'd go read that. Man, I don't know. It's Good to Be a Man is kind of our generation's best book, maybe, of all time. You can read that. No, honestly, just go to savethepca.com. And I wish I knew a good resource to recommend off the top of my head, but the BCO is pretty clear. And the BCO on officers and elders and deacons is actually a beautifully written document. You can go look there, but I wish I had something I could recommend off the top of my head. Zach Garris, he's written a book called Masculine Christianity. Zach interacts with this because he's in the PCA quite a bit. That'd be one other resource you can check out. But look, the Bible's clear. Women shouldn't have authority over men. It's abundantly clear. So just go read anyone before the 1900s on 1 Timothy chapter 2. Go read Calvin, go look at Gouge, go look at any of these guys and see what they teach, and that you can actually have a very high view of women and not have women officers. It's not hard at all. The church has been doing it for a long time. So
very good. Michael, thanks for joining us. Good luck. We're praying for your efforts to save the PCA. In the meantime, if you want to pick up some books at noquarternovember.com, all of the weekly ones are there available for you. Keep an eye out for Doug on the Road with the Horse and the Fire, and it's great, and you should check that out coming on Thursday. And we will be back next week for the pre-Thanksgiving episode of Doug and Friends No Quarter November. See you later.